There's this scene in Richard Linklater's Before Sunset, when Ethan Hawke's character tells a story of a Nazi officer in World War II tasked with detonating a charge designed to obliterate Notre Dame Cathedral. An officer he imagines who, in the final moments of his mission, was so moved by the cathedral's beauty that he couldn't bring himself to flip the switch. And if that story, invented as it might have been, weren't affecting enough, Julie Delpy's character Celine looks upon the great cathedral and says, "But you have to think that Notre Dame will be gone one day." This is just one moment from film that took on very new meaning and new consequence during the fire of Notre Dame in April of last year. One moment that's driven me to look back and examine the history of the cathedral, its cultural significance, and most keenly, the role the cathedral has played for so many years in the backdrop of cinema. I specifically asked myself this: how does Notre Dame in film thematically reflect the conflict and reverence of its own past? The fire of April 15th was not the first time Notre Dame Cathedral fell victim to such mass structural trauma. At the tail end of the 18th century, during the events of the French Revolution in Paris, the cathedral was nearly destroyed, defiled by revolutionaries and anti-Christian mobs, its statues obliterated, lead from its roof looted to fashion bullets, its bells melted down to construct ammunition for cannons. Even after the war was over, even after the Catholic Church regained control over the cathedral, Notre Dame remained in a perpetuating state of decay. For 3 decades, its status, symbolism, and source of national pride were very much neglected. But in 1831, things changed. French poet and novelist Victor Hugo published The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the famous story of Quasimodo, the deformed bell ringer of the cathedral, and his admiration for the gypsy Esmeralda. That classic tale of love, murder, sacrifice, and all that falls between has been adapted to screen almost every decade of the 20th century, each rendition taking its own liberties with the details of the book, yet each too finding its own way to pay its homage. The book itself was such a popular success that it reignited interest in the cathedral and led to a state-funded initiative to restore Notre Dame to its former glory, a multi-decade endeavor that culminated in the monument's rededication on May 31st, 1864. One book was able to accomplish this shift in perspective because Hugo did more than place his characters in the vicinity of the church. Entire chapters of text were dedicated solely to describing and admiring its art, history, and design. Notre Dame lived and breathed with just as much depth and vibrancy as the novel's human players. Amidst all the book was, it was at its foundation a love letter to a piece of history that Hugo believed deserved to be remembered. If I had to distill the miracle of film down to a single function, it would be its ability to preserve history and story. Notre Dame, of course, has been imprinted onto history thanks to a great number of films, as we will soon see, but it probably plays its most significant role in the various renditions of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and while once again each telling is different, one scene always tends to find its place, that in which Quasimodo from his bell tower witnesses Esmeralda sentenced to death in the shadow of the cathedral below, and in a desperate act of devotion, he rescues her, takes her into the safety of the church, and chants the famous line, "Sanctuary, sanctuary." Many cinematic inclusions of Notre Dame share in a spirit of passion akin to Quasimodo's heartfelt act of courage, while many others evoke something perhaps more akin to the threat of a violent death that put Esmeralda in the position that demanded that courage in the first place. In film, like in history, love and violence are two substantial themes resonating within and around Notre Dame Cathedral. In Jean-Pierre Genet's whimsical 2001 film Amélie, the titular character at 6 years old, stands at the steps of Notre Dame when her mother beside her is abruptly killed by a vacationing suicide. Meanwhile, in the 1961 Paul Newman film, Paris Blues, local musician Eddie Cook and American tourist Connie Lamson fall in love in front of the moon-swept cathedral behind them.
What's that?
Notre Dame.
You didn't even look.
Well, I didn't think they'd moved it.
I guess you pointed it out to lots of girls from here.
One or two.
Then in Anthony Waller's An American Werewolf in Paris, a movie about a society of murderous French lycanthropes, a series of doting yet chilling nighttime shots in the rain of Notre Dame's Gothic features are used to establish the film's themes of horror and the supernatural. The camera seems particularly inclined to return time and again to the cathedral's somber statuettes and grotesque gargoyles. 2006's The Devil Wears Prada sees Anne Hathaway and Simon Baker's characters fall in love on a nighttime stroll of Paris, with the cathedral featured prominently in the background. But that's not before Hugh Jackman's character, in his opening action sequence of Van Helsing, battles a charismatic Mr. Hyde at night in and atop the roof of Notre Dame. The scene ends when Van Helsing launches the monster through the cathedral's famous rose window, sending a reverted Dr. Jekyll to his death on the streets below. In Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, Carla Bruni and Owen Wilson sit on a bench in the gardens at the feet of Notre Dame as she reads a letter of admiration to the city of Paris.
Paris in the summer, what it must have been like to sit opposite one's lover at Maxime's in its best time.
Yet the theme of Notre Dame rooftop battles rages on in Paul W.S. Anderson's The Three Musketeers, when we witness the 3.5-minute-long death match between Logan Lerman's character and his nemesis, played by the great Mads Mikkelsen. In this scene from Rugrats in Paris, a wedding is conducted inside the great cathedral. And finally, in the 1963 mystery thriller Charade, two characters, played by Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, discuss murder and assassination on an amble through Paris just before making this reference to the Victor Hugo novel and to the cathedral just overhead.
Would you do anything like that?
What, assassinate someone?
No, swing down from there on a rope to save the woman you love. Like the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Huh? Oh, who put that there?
Just as Notre Dame as a monument has been, both in history and through literature, an object of love and an object of violence, its representation, its inclusion in cinema has been the setting, the backdrop for those very same themes. Now, I admit that perhaps this thesis taken in its entirety is an inadequate one. After all, Notre Dame means far more to the people of Paris and to the world than just a thing to have undergone destruction or to have been adored by writers. It is an icon, a symbol, and its representation or position in history and inside the hearts of human beings is not singular at all. But that accrued symbolism is significant within cinema as well. Many films, even beyond those mentioned, utilize the iconicity of Notre Dame in the backgrounds of shots, most commonly, of course, to establish location, and they can do this because the cathedral is meaningful enough and known enough to serve that purpose. Just like the Palace of Westminster in London tells you this is London, or the Golden Gate Bridge tells you this is San Francisco, the site of Notre Dame is symbolic within its geography. These monuments might mean something different to different people, but it is in part because of the collective meaning and historical significance which they carry that we are able to recognize them by sight, and in turn the place that contains them. As a film lover, what so greatly affected me about the fire of Notre Dame on April 15th, and what so significantly provoked me about Celine's line from Before Sunset, that you have to think Notre Dame will be gone one day, was the image placed in my mind of a Paris landscape without it. I was 6 years old when the Twin Towers fell. I grew up in a world where the New York skyline in contemporary media lacked something that could once be used to single-handedly identify its location. What then of a day when Notre Dame is gone? Gone from the city of Paris or from the backdrop of a film set in it? how would its absence following such a day affect the identity of Paris in film, or the themes of the scenes that comprise that film? I don't know, but I can say, and with much gratitude, that that day is not today. Hey everyone, I'm Danny. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, share, and subscribe, or find me at patreon.com/CinemaStix. Until next time.